Okay, let's unpack this. You've brought us a really fascinating stack of sources today, articles, research, your notes, all focused on the latest in Ukraine, especially some pretty high-stakes diplomatic moves. Our job today is really to cut through the noise, pull out the key things from these reports you've shared so you can get a real sense of what's actually driving things over there.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, is how you see these high-level talks, these sort of political deadlines, and then the brutal reality on the ground all intersecting. We'll try and connect those dots for you. Look at the strategies and, frankly, the harsh facts.
Exactly. So we're going to look at those recent U.S.-Russia talks, the pressure the U.S. is applying, and also what's still happening inside Ukraine while all this diplomacy is supposedly going on. It's definitely complex, but hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture of the really crucial elements at play right now. Okay, so first up, the diplomatic table. The Kremlin announced something pretty significant recently, didn't they? Talks between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin. They called them constructive. They did. A 3-hour meeting, apparently. And Putin, according to the Kremlin, sent and received signals about the, quote, Ukrainian question. Now, that phrasing itself, Ukrainian question, it's quite loaded, isn't it? It often implies that Ukraine's future isn't really for Ukraine to decide alone. Right, that it's more about what the big powers think. Precisely. And interestingly, they said more details would only come out after Witkoff reported back to Trump. And notably, silence from the U.S. and Ukraine immediately afterwards. The visuals were quite something, too. Russian media shared these pictures. Witkoff and Putin smiling, shaking hands in this very grand gilded hall. They've met before, several times actually, certainly sends a message. But given that expectations for any real settlement seem pretty low, what are those pictures really telling us? Is it just optics?
Well, optics are definitely part of the strategy, I'd say. For Russia, showing engagement like this plays well internationally, it makes them look open to diplomacy, and it sort of subtly reinforces their narrative of dealing directly with major powers, potentially, sidelining Kyiv in the process.
So less about actual progress right now, more about perception management.
I think that's a fair assessment, and the sources we looked at are quite clear. Expectations for a deal by Friday were, very muted, despite the high-level meeting and those, smiley handshakes.
Muted expectations, yet they seem to meet for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Is that purely for show then, for the global audience? Or is there still some, strategic value, even if a breakthrough isn't likely?
Oh, there can be value, even without a breakthrough. These meetings are chances to, feel out red lines, understand the other side's current thinking, maybe just keep a communication channel open to avoid miscalculations or dangerous escalations. It's always a kind of strategic dance, Every word, every handshake is analyzed.
But what really puts these talks into sharp focus, gives them that urgency, is the context, right? Donald Trump's very public deadline for a ceasefire. That's where it gets really interesting.
Absolutely crucial point. Trump's laid down a pretty significant threat. He's talking hefty sanctions or even secondary sanctions.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for everyone, secondary sanctions are a big deal. They wouldn't just hit Russia. They penalize companies or countries anywhere that keep doing major business with Russia, particularly in energy.
Wow, so that really widens the net.
It really does. It massively increases the potential economic pain if Moscow doesn't move towards ending what Trump called the horrible war.
And it's quite a shift for Trump, isn't it? I mean, you remember before he took office, he famously said he could end the war in a day. Obviously, that didn't happen. And his rhetoric now seems much tougher, perhaps born from impatience. He even said, last month, I think it was, something like, we thought we had it settled numerous times, and then President Putin goes out and starts launching rockets. He mentioned Kyiv, kills a lot of people in a nursing home or whatever. That quote really struck me. What do the sources suggest is behind this hardening stance?
Well, the analysis points towards a growing frustration, like you said. Frustration with the lack of diplomatic progress and the sheer ongoing human tragedy of it all. And this shift, it connects directly to what Ukraine's been saying. President Zelensky has argued for a while that Russia will only get serious about peace when the money starts running out. So he actually welcomed this tougher U.S. talk, the threat of sanctions, tariffs on Russian oil buyers. He sees it as leverage, real leverage.
Okay, so we have the diplomacy, the threats of sanctions.
But and this is the critical disconnect. Despite all that the Trump threats, the Witkoff-Putin talks, the reality on the ground hasn't changed in the way you might hope. Russia has kept up its large-scale air attacks on Ukraine, and they've been devastating.
And the human cost is just staggering. The reports from Kyiv's city military administration, that attack last week, The death toll rose to 32 after another victim died. 32. That makes it the single deadliest strike on Kyiv since the full invasion began. It's hard to even comprehend.
It really is. And it wasn't an isolated incident. There was also that Russian attack on a holiday camp, of all places, in Zaporizhia. 2 dead, 12 injured there. Zelensky commented on that one, didn't he? He said something like, there's no military sense in this. It's just cruelty to scare people.
Cruelty to scare people.
Yeah.
It just highlights the brutality that continues day in, day out.
Exactly. And let's not forget the bigger picture here. We're 3.5 years into this full-scale invasion. There were those 3 rounds of talks in Istanbul early on, but they failed. Moscow's demands for peace, their military and political conditions, they remain completely unacceptable to Kyiv and its allies, and the Kremlin just keeps refusing requests for Zelensky and Putin to actually meet directly. So you have this persistent gap between any diplomatic overtures and the grim military reality.
So with all these complex, almost contradictory things happening, talks, threats, ongoing attacks, what does this mean for support for Ukraine, particularly military aid? Is that changing?
Well, there was that recent development after a call between Zelensky and Trump. The U.S. administration approved another $200 million, that's about $150 million, in military sales to Ukraine. And interestingly, during that same call, they specifically discussed defense cooperation and drone production.
Drones. Yeah, that seems key, doesn't it?
It really does. It points to a focus on boosting Ukraine's abilities in areas where they've shown they can be really effective, hitting back strategically.
And we've certainly seen that play out. Ukraine using drones to hit Russian refineries, energy facilities, these quite asymmetric strikes deep inside Russia. While Moscow, as we just discussed, keeps using its air power against Ukrainian cities, causing terrible civilian casualties, it's a stark contrast in tactics.
So when you step back, you see this incredibly tangled picture, don't you? You've got these high-level discussions happening in gilded halls, very stern warnings being issued, but at the same time, this brutal, grinding conflict continues on the ground. It's a real mix of diplomacy, economic warfare, and, well, actual warfare.
And connecting it all up, thinking about the bigger picture, it really forces you to ask a fundamental question, doesn't it? In situations like this one, what actually works? What truly shifts things towards peace? Is it the diplomatic signals? Is it the economic pain from sanctions? Or is it, sadly, just the sheer awful reality of the ongoing fighting that eventually forces a change?
Yeah, this deep dive really shows how hard it is to separate those threats. We've got the constructive talks on one hand, the threat of massive sanctions on the other, heartfelt pleas for peace, and then these continued deadly attacks. So as you process all this, maybe think about that disconnect for yourself. Those smiling handshakes we saw versus the grim reality of the rising death toll in places like Kyiv. How do those pieces even fit together? And what does that tell you about the prospects for actually ending this war?